In this video, we're gonna talk about how to restore really bad headlights. Now let's get straight into it. What's going on? So glad you guys are here and welcome back to the Wilson Auto Detailing community. If you are a professional auto detailer who wants to become more successful and profitable in your business, or just a car enthusiast who wants to improve your detailing ability, then definitely consider hitting that big red subscribe button right below this video. So for those of you who are in the Wilson Auto Detailing community, you know that I just put out a fairly recent headlight restoration video, but the difference between that and this one is that these headlights are actually much worse, and so we're gonna have to take a few more steps to get these to the perfect condition that I want them to. But if you wanna see the other kind of more simpler by hand headlight restoration video, then check out the YouTube card that I'm hooking up right now. But before we start, I want to give you guys a quick overview of kind of what we're going to do. Because these headlights are so bad, and of course you guys probably already know this, but the reason headlights start fogging up is because manufacturers put a very thin kind of clear coat over the headlight, and that clear coat, when it's not maintained, starts to get yellow, marred, oxidized, all that sort of stuff. That clear coat has to be sanded off and then more or less replaced in order to actually restore these to perfection. You sand it and then polish out those sanding marks, and we're going to walk through those steps. But basically what we're going to do is, rather than starting from a higher grit sandpaper like 800 or 1000 or even 1500, which a lot of times with headlight restorations that are not very bad, you can start with those higher grit sandpapers. In this specific scenario, we're going to have to start with a lower grit sandpaper like 400 or 600. 400 might be a little overkill, but we might do it just to show you guys the process, because once again, these are so bad. If I were to start with something like 800 or 1000, it would take such a long time because the grit is so much more fine, and we need something that's going to bite and kind of just remove that oxidized clear coat very quickly, so that I'm not spending a ton of time doing this. So I'm gonna go ahead and walk you guys through exactly how I do that. So you guys can see that it's taken like really no time at all, because once again, we're using a much lower grit sandpaper because these headlights are super yellow. And so if I were to start with 800, and really even if I were to start with 600, I'd be doing this for way longer than I really wanted to. So some of you might think it's overkill, and it is a little bit overkill, but it's not gonna be an issue because we're just gonna make those sanding marks smaller and smaller as we increase the grit of the sandpaper, and then we'll polish those sanding marks out and then put a sealant on it to protect it. But once again, this saves me so much time. So she's been, how long have you been doing this, Coco? Maybe
90 seconds.
90 seconds. This is where we're at, and so we're still gonna go because there are still some yellow spots here, but it is getting so much better, so much faster. So this first part shouldn't take any more than 5 minutes. And once again, this first part is just to remove all of the yellow clear coat. And so after all that yellow clear coat is removed, we're just gonna go to a higher grit sandpaper to start making those sanding marks smaller and smaller and smaller. Okay, so Coco has gone on and moved to the next headlight, but right here is the 400 grit kind of finish. Now, how do I know this is finished? Number one, visually, I can't see any yellow marks left. But number two, now that it's dry, you can see there's no clear spot left. There's no sort of shiny spot. That means all of the clear coat has been sanded off. All you're left with is this foggy, kind of milky color. Now, if you're not careful, you can touch it with your wet hand and it'll look like there's a clear spot because it's wet. But once again, let it all air dry and you can see that it's ready to be kind of moved on to a higher grit because all the clear coat is gone. So this is my 800 grit. The reason I'm going from 400 to 800 is because, number one, I kind of have enough experience where I don't need to do the 600 middleman ground. And number two, even if you don't, it's really not that big a deal. You're jumping from 400 to 800 really isn't as large of a jump as you think it is. I'm going to minimize these scratches. I'm going to make them smaller by using the 800. Then we're going to go to about 1000 to 1500. Then we're going to go to 2000, and the 2000 is going to be our last one. And that's going to basically make the sanding marks very small so that they're easy to polish out with the rotary polisher. So I'm going to go ahead and go to 800, 1500, 2000, and then we're going to bring you guys in for the finished look before we polish out the sanding marks with the rotary polisher. So let's do it. So I just finished with the 1000, and I want you guys to kind of see what this looks like, because if you have some reservations about using something like 400 grit sandpaper because you're like, well, those sanding marks are going to be hard to get out, that's just not the case. I can show you guys from a bunch of different angles. This is after the 1000 grit, and it's already starting to look really clear because the higher the sanding grit, the more clear it's going to be, because the smaller the sanding marks are going to be. But once again, this has probably taken maybe 5 minutes to actually get all the way to the 1000. Now I'm gonna go from here to 1500 to 2000, but once again, my main point is just it's so fast, and the 400 grit is not damaging anything. All it did is produce enough grit to rip that kind of yellow marred part off very quickly. Okay, so here's the final look before we actually use the rotary polisher to polish out the sanding marks. Once again, I think it's worth reiterating. You guys can see, this basically looks the same as if I would have started with 800. The only difference is it went by so much faster. So I know guys who don't want to start with that low grit of sandpaper, but I just don't really know how you argue with these kind of results. There's nothing damaged, there's nothing that's not going to be polished out. And so let's go ahead and polish it just to kind of finalize my point. So I'm going to use a polish by Showcar. It's called Power Bright. It's kind of like a body shop sort of compound. It's more for like heavy removal, and so I like doing that on headlights just because you're literally removing, you know, sanding marks, and so I kind of want a powerful polish. Now, I'm going to be using a wool pad. It's actually a 50/50 synthetic wool pad, and then you guys can see about how much polish I'm using. It's not a ton, but it is kind of liberal because I don't want to have to go back and then, you know, go back again and again as I go to different parts of the headlight. So I'd like to knock all this out in kind of one fell swoop. So I'm going to go ahead and throw the cord over my shoulder, and you guys can watch kind of this in fast motion as the sanding marks go away. And I'm gonna put it on around like 800 to 1400 RPM, just kind of depending on where I'm at in the polishing process. So here we go. Alright guys, so now this headlight is totally done, the other is done as well. Now, at this point there are people who would apply like a spray clear coat or something like that. I'm not a huge fan of spray clear coats, I'll explain that in another video. What I'm going to do is go ahead and apply a sealant here, and this is Meguiar's Ultimate Paste Wax, and yes, I know it's a wax, but the only kind of things in this entire wax is synthetic, and so that's why by and large in the auto detailing world we don't consider this a wax, even though that's how it's marketed. It's marketed as a wax mainly because people recognize the word wax. A lot of regular kind of average consumers don't recognize the word sealant, and so we put wax instead. But once again, there's no carnauba or anything natural or plant-based in here, and so it is a sealant, at least in my book and many other detailers' book. Now the reason I'm applying this is because number one, it'll last for somewhere probably around 6-ish months, especially with the kind of condition this car is kept in. It's not driven a ton, and this car is kind of driven just within its own sphere of influence here in the city that this customer lives in. And so I'm gonna go ahead and let this kind of bond sit for a second. I'm gonna let it sit for, and put a little bit more and let it sit for a little bit longer than I normally would, just because I like it to really get on there, and that might be just my OCD, and then I will wipe it off. But this car is gonna be maintained, and so that's why I'm not too worried about putting a clear coat on here, because I'm gonna be seeing this car over and over again. So come to the other headlight, and I'll show you guys. I'm gonna do the exact same thing. Now this result is a little bit different. I don't know if you guys can tell. It's still a little bit, kind of has a yellowish hue to it, and I want to make sure you guys understand that's not an outer or exterior problem. That's an interior problem. Of course, once again, this car is about 17 years old, and so eventually, yes, you can do as much as you want to the outside, but there may be an interior issue, and so sometimes on the interior, they get mist, they get they start like condensating or condensing, and then you get water in there. Sometimes the inner part of the headlight itself starts to yellow because bugs get in there. There's things that get in these little tiny cracks when the hood gets open, when you're driving, all that sort of stuff. And so yes, you can do as much as you want to the outside, but sometimes it's just going to be an interior problem. Okay, so this is the finished look, and it's now sealed and protected. So next time it starts to get like scratched, things like that, you don't actually have to sand it. You can just polish it away. It's not going to be any big deal. So because this is a 2001 and it's like almost 2 decades old, once again, you can clean the exterior, you can sand the exterior, and you can polish the outside, but eventually there are interior problems that start to yellow or get water or things like that, and so you'll never get 100% a perfect headlight. It's just not possible unless you literally replace the headlight, which most people don't want to do. So once again, guys, these are the kind of results you get, and of course the main point of this video was showing you guys that you can actually start with 400 grit sandpaper and still polish out every single sanding mark, no problem, to where it's totally clear, shiny, and basically just like it was 17 years ago. If you guys like this video, make sure to hit the thumbs up button, and if you have any questions, comments, concerns, hook up all that stuff in the YouTube comments below, because I always read those, and I'm sure to get back to you guys as fast as I can. If you guys want to get your hands on the products or the tools that I used in this video, the sealant that I used, the DeWalt rotary polisher, the pad, the polishes I used, I'm gonna hook up all that stuff in the YouTube description box below. So if you want to get your hands on that, use my Amazon links, because it does give this channel a very small commission, but it helps this channel stay alive so I can continue to give out awesome content just like this all the time. And if you are new to the Wilson Auto Detailing community, then definitely consider subscribing, because I come out with videos all the time just like this on products, tools, skills, strategies, communication skills, business skills, and so much more, all in an effort to help the pro detailers become more successful and profitable in their businesses. And on this channel, I share the same strategies that turn my auto detailing business into a full-time income with only part-time hours. So if that interests you, definitely subscribe. Once again, thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, from Luke here at Wilson Auto Detailing, keep working hard, and I'll see you guys in the next video. All in an effort to help the pro detailers become more successful and profitable in their businesses. And on this channel, I share the same strategies. Ah, it's so much. Okay, hold on.